Hey there folks, Mick here with the Foam Forge. Today we are going to be finishing up this blade here. If you'll notice, I carved into the cross guard a light symbol, and then I also carved into the pommel a skull with a stone bit on my Dremel. We just got to do the other side here, and then we can plasti dip this blade and everything, and then let that dry, and then we will paint it, and then we'll leather wrap the handle, and we will put our cloth on the blade. Uh, Stay tuned and come along with me. Hey folks, here I am just carving in this skull into the pommel with my Dremel attachment. I normally do this at the end right before I plasti dip anything. That way if I need to sand it or go back, I can just do all of that in one spot and not have to worry about it. This step isn't necessary, but I do like to embellish my blades a bit and make them a bit funner for myself. Now that we have our uh, pommel shaped and our guard done, what we're going to do is take our black plasti dip, and we are going to coat the blade, coat the cross guard and the pommel. That way, whenever we paint, it shows up really nicely, and it also puts a seal on the foam itself. That way, when we're out in the elements or anything, it'll survive water, it'll survive rain, it'll survive snow, some of the stuff that we have to deal with when we're on the field of battle. Um, it's just a good practice to do. That way, you don't have any problems with your blade. It's always important to do your plasti dipping in a solid, even coat. Sometimes one good thick coat is enough. Sometimes I'll do up to 3 coats depending on how much blue I can see through it after the first 2 coats. So now that we have our blade plasti dipped and we are waiting for it to dry, I've got it hanging up behind me there. We're going to take some faux leather here. This is just like seat leather, whatever it is. You can use couch leather, you can use whatever you want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a straight line across it. I only need about roughly 20 inches to cover the handle of this blade. And then we're going to put a taper on either side. That way when we wrap it around, it can meet up at the back end of the sword, kind of like this one is here. This is another sword that I've built recently. Same technique, golf club, blue foam, EVA foam, and then the leather handle. So we will go ahead and get that cut. Make sure that when you are cutting your strip, you leave yourself enough room to mess up. It will happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but if you don't leave yourself enough room, you will end up having to use another piece, and that can get costly. Now we've got our strip of leather cut. This should fit. If it doesn't fit, we will just adjust it before we contact cement it to the blade itself. That way we have a perfect fit and everything matches up. Okay, now that we have our sword here cured with the plastic dip, what we're going to do is take some metallic brass spray paint and paint the cross guard and the pommel, and then we'll hang it back up to dry. You don't need a lot of paint. It covers pretty quickly. Um, make sure your tip is clear, and you just kind of spritz it, and it covers really, really fast. Um, you don't need a lot of it, and this is going to get sealed um, with a clear coat. I like to use the um, clear flex seal. So it's kind of like a rubberized coating. Makes everything kind of dull down the color just a little bit. Um, that way it looks more battle worn or used. Make sure you get all the sides of your detail and everything. That way we get things to stand out pretty nicely. Maybe you can see the cross guard there, the image on it comes out real nice whenever you hit it with this paint. Like I said, you don't need to use a lot. Just spritz it here and there, and then we'll let that dry up. Alright, so our gold brass color is all dry, and we're ready to seal this bad boy up. I like to use the clear flex seal. It has a rubberized coating. It works really nicely. It shoots on super quick, which you'll see here in a second. And it kind of gives a used luster to the brass color, or like a steel color if you're using that. We're also going to coat the blade. That way underneath our covering it is waterproof. Again, you're going to want to make sure you spray it from all the different angles. I am not going to be coating the handle because it is getting a leather wrap, and it also needs a point from which to dry. I like to hang them to get them to dry. But you want to make sure you get a nice even coat along all the sides of your blade, even the tip here. Now on the blade, you don't want to get too much because it'll make it hard. You don't want it to be hard, of course, because you're going to be hitting people with it. If it's too hard, it won't pass. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll leave the whole strike surface. If somebody wants a super light hitting weapon, I will not plasti dip that and not seal it. But that does not help the longevity of the weapon. All right, now that we have our sword fully coated in our plasticine cover, and it's all cured up and dried and everything, what we're going to do is we're going to cover the blade now. I found this fabric here at a thrift store. It's like a canvas, but it has some stretch to it, and it's nice and soft. So that's what I've been using here lately to coat my blades in. But what you're going to do is you're going to take your blade. I like to use a tape measure. That way I can wrap it around the blade and see how big around it is. Normally they come out to be about 7 inches. This one here is 7 1/4 inches at the very top here. We want to make sure we go down the blade as well and make sure that we have that same mark. And that is also 7 1/4 inches, almost 7 1/2. So what that means, we're going to cut a piece of our fabric, probably about 7 1/2 inches wide, and then the full length of our blade, which this blade is going to be 28 inches long. So we will cut that and then sew it on our sewing machine. This is just a thrift store find. I got it for like 10 bucks. It is old, but it does do different stitches. I like to use a heavy stitch on it because you're going to be fighting with it. You don't want the seam to just bust open, and then your sword is exposed and compromised, and then you can't use that weapon anymore. Uh, so I'm going to mark this, get it cut, and then sew it up. So what I'm doing here is I am making sure that I have enough area to do a fold over, sew one side, and then I'll go around the tip of the blade, marking that down so I get a good fit. Remember to, again, leave yourself some leeway. That way, if it is a little too big, you can just re-sew it. Now that we have our piece of fabric cut, what we're going to do is measure this out to 28 inches. Then we're going to fold it in half, and we'll put a stitch down the side. And then once we have that done, we can measure up to the blade. Make sure you always leave extra for yourself for the end piece. So what we're going to do is put a rounded edge on it. That way we can slip this inside out and then slide it over the blade. And then we will glue it at the bottom base by the cross guard here. It'll have about 3 to 4 inches of glue that will hold the fabric on. It'll be pretty tight around this, so it won't slide around while you're fighting, and it'll give it an overall blade aesthetic. I always like to do a test fit on the blade before I actually glue anything on or finish everything up. But what you can do is you can just go back through and re-sew it a little closer, especially if you're using a stretchy fabric like I am using in this video. I do like a stretchy fabric because it kind of adheres to the whole shape of the blade. Now that we have our sleeve sewn up, what we're going to do is we're going to go around the tip here. I left myself enough room on the top and the bottom. That way if I have to adjust it, it's always better to have an ability to do so. If you don't leave yourself enough room along the edges, you will end up finding that you will need to cut something off at some point, and it will not go as planned. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use this marker because it's about a ½ inch wide, and I can put this up against the blade here, and it'll make a mark all the way around and get completely to the side of where my blade is going to be. This purple mark right here, and then we'll sew around that curve, and then we'll cut the excess off. We'll flip it inside out, and then we will remeasure it to length, and then cut the excess off, be able to glue it up, and then the blade will be all done. If you don't have a sewing machine, that's totally fine. If you can't find one at a thrift store for really cheap or anything like that, you can always just hand sew. It takes a little bit more time, and you have to do more passes on it to get the strength that you need out of it, but it does work just the same. I did my blades like that for years until I finally learned how to use a sewing machine, and that has changed everything for the better for me, at least. Okay, so now that we've got this all done up, what we're going to do is we're going to lay this over the top of the blade at the top here, and then you'll see that we have some excess down here by the hilt. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip the sleeve inside out or outside in, whichever floats your boat. And then we will measure it up and see how much we have to cut off. Right now it looks to be about a ½ inch. It's always good to test fit it first and see where you're sitting before you cut off too much.
Now, depending on how tight you actually get your cover, this one was a little bit tighter than I normally do, but it worked out pretty well. Took me quite a while to get everything on. Thankfully, I sped this part of the video up. This whole process here took about 45 minutes. If you do a better job than I did in this, to where it's still tight, but it is not extremely tight as this one is, it only takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Like I said, the tighter you get them, the more time it's going to take, and you're going to have to work it down the whole length of your blade with the pliers, which can cause a tear or a rip, which will set you back and it might upset you, but hey, it's just a foam sword. It's not like it can't be fixed. So, just do your best. And I mean, you don't have to do the process how I do it. This is just how I like to do it because I feel it is more aesthetically pleasing.
Sometimes covering a blade like this can take quite a while. It all depends on how tight or loose your sleeve is. If you want a uniform looking blade, I would suggest to not make it overly loose, as it can catch on somebody's garb or armor and rip. Um, the only downfall to doing it like that is sometimes there is a tendency for pliers to make it rip, which is an eventuality, and if that happens, you just have to start over. But if you just make it the right size, everything goes beautifully and smoothly, and then you end up with a great looking blade. I'm sure you saw me check my tip, which we are still just at about 3/4 of an inch sticking through, which means that this is a legal amtgard blade. All we have to do now is wrap our handle, pull this up a little bit this way, and put some glue down. This might actually be tight enough to fight with as is because it's tripled over right here, because I had enough left over, but I'm going to go ahead and glue it anyways, just to be safe. All right, now that we've got our blade all covered, I've cut down the end piece and made sure it fits up here. And what we're going to do is glue that up and then slide this the rest of the way over. That way we have a mechanical connection for our blade cover. That way when we're fighting with it, it doesn't slip.
This glue here is really great for adhesion. It takes a little bit to finally set up, but it once it does, it's not going anywhere. And if you ever have to remove the cover from the blade, it takes the plasti dip with it. It is that strong of an adhesive, so you don't have to worry about it coming off mid-fight or in any other way. It's a very strong bond, and what I'll normally do is I'll get it close enough and then push it all in. I might use my finger like I'm doing here, or the end of a paintbrush or something like that, but it's usually better to glue it and then cut your excess off. Here, I did not do that, and it kind of made it to where there was a little bit of the blade showing on one side, but that's okay.
Now we're just going to let that dry up, and while that is drying up, I should be able to leather wrap the handle, and then this will be a completed blade. So first things first, we're going to take our strip of leather that we had previously cut, and we are going to match it up to our handle and make sure we don't need to trim it down any. That way we know that we have a big enough piece for wrapping this whole handle here. Just make sure that when you do this part, you wrap it around how you actually want it to look. I normally do about a 1/4 inch of overlap. That way you have kind of some leeway, and you can make sure that it's going to look how you want it to look. So for this, it looks like we have the correct amount to go around our handle and make it look really nice. So I'm going to get this glued up and let it set and then get it on the blade.
So for the wrapping process, I like to measure things 2 to 3 times and make sure it fits. That way, if I have to make a steep or angular cut so it fits right, so there's no bunching when you wrap, it helps. And that way you can kind of control what's going on with it and just get an even good coat of your contact cement on your surfaces. Let it set up a bit, and then you'll be able to stick it with no problem.
So now that we have our contact cement all set up and ready to go, we're going to go ahead and wrap this blade here. Whenever you do start this, pick your point that you want to have it start from, set it down, and then just wrap. Um, this will conform to the shape that you are trying to get out of it, because it becomes a little more pliable whenever you put the contact cement on it, and it will kind of just suck to the object that you're putting it on. I like to leave myself a little bit of leeway for when I get to this point, because you have to come back and put a little bit of your contact cement onto the actual leather so it will stick to itself. Um, that way you can go all the way around it how you need to and get everything to form and stick. Now when I do this part, I generally just tend to wet it and then set it and then let it cure like that. Um, that usually sticks down no matter what, and then you'll have a little tiny bit of excess there that you can just wipe off. Make sure you get your contact edge for the bottom of where it connects nice and stuck down, that way it doesn't pop out on you. And if it does, 5-10 minutes later, just come back and reseat it and pop it back down. It usually sticks pretty well. But there we have it. We have a new sword. In about 2 hours, all of the glue and everything will be set, and then in about a day it will be ready for the battlefield. If you guys enjoyed this video, please throw me a like, maybe subscribe to the channel, and if you guys want to see me build anything else in specifics, things that you haven't seen before, things that you just want to know how to build, drop a comment, and I'll see what I can do.